Professor Rickards is just going to, it's going to just take some questions. We've got a short time for questions due to the fact that our principals and Catherine are slightly over.
So does anyone have any quick burning questions? Because what we can do, if there's one or two now, and there's time for about 10 minutes of questions at the end, so I'm sure that our panellists will be happy to take them over. Let's take one or two questions now if you have any. Yes, if you'll just identify yourself as well, that'd be great.
Sure, Andrew Taylor, Principal of the Kilmore International School. Look, I just wonder, in terms of measuring value added, which is basically relative progress, is it possible not just to use the national tests,
years 3, 5, 7, 9, is it possible to use that and extend it to the end of the secondary years, so that it could be comparing performance in NAPLAN to say VCE?
I just checked with Hattie and he said yes. I was hoping for something expansive. Absolutely yes, it's just added another word.
We have one school in one of our networks which is only a senior school, and so they've got an interesting challenge in picking up from the year 9 into their years 11 and 12. There are schools looking exactly that in the network.
Without wanting to confuse you, my name's Peter Houlihan. And I come from Marasine College in Warragul. I'm wondering if there's any tools that can help the majority of teachers in secondary schools who don't teach directly literacy and numeracy and who come from other areas and who, when we talk about knowing their effect, think, well, that doesn't affect me, that doesn't relate to me because the NAPLAN isn't relevant to my subject. How can we help them to measure their effect?
I've got another response, absolutely yes. But I don't know how much do you want to extend that out now, but they are things that are obviously covered in the network.
Aside from absolutely yes, that's exactly what we're doing in the writing group. I just pointed out that we're the only primary school, all the rest of them are secondaries. All of those secondaries have got their maths teachers, science teachers, humanities teachers teaching writing. So yes, absolutely, and it's fabulous to see.
Now, Catherine invited me to come up here just to chair, so I'm just going to draw the questions to a pause now so that we can have our next two speakers, and then we come back to some more questions and we will finish at 9:15 as it's advertised on the program. So, back to Catherine.
So I want to thank the panel, and Kerry said exactly what I was going to say, by the way, in terms of being able to work across the curriculum in secondary schools and engage teachers across the curriculum who traditionally think that literacy, for example, is not their business. They should have a look at some of the questions in senior maths tests and exams. So, thank you very much to the panel, and then it is a great joy to me actually to be able to introduce Professor Ian Mariels. Our work in making the broader University of Melbourne accessible to you is a work in progress, but on the other hand, the University of Melbourne is very interested in you because we spoke last couple of weeks ago to a subcommittee of Chancellery, which is like talking to very senior people in the University of Melbourne, and they were very excited when they understood there are 73 schools who are interested in those connections because from the university side, a lot of people want to have an impact and work with schools. So that's a work in progress that will expand over the next 3 years. But it is very, very pleasing for me, and I really appreciate that Ian Mariels has made the time to be here, and I welcome you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Phil, and good morning, everybody. Yesterday evening, I was walking back with Phil from dinner, and he said, "Oh, you can expect about 100 people, 220. Well, I'm really delighted to see that many people interested in education And I'm really interested in the product, of course, because I'm allowed in university to be responsible for the training of engineers and IT specialists. And we train these people for 5 years roughly, then they enter the workforce, and by the time I think you are 80-year-old right now, 2030, you graduate, you'll be working for 45 to 50 years. You will probably reinvent your career at least 10 times, because the average lifetime of knowledge is probably 0 seconds. They have to work with knowledge, basically. And that's really what we would like to train people for. But if I have one message for all of you, that you please walk away with and use in your schools is, I want more girls, I want more women in school, in engineering. We pride ourselves on having a fairly good ratio, 1 in 3, which is the highest in the country. It's not the highest in the world. I used to go to Portugal for that. There's about 50-50. Or some other countries where you come from speak Spanish. I don't know what it is with Spanish people, but at least they seem to get it right as far as engineering is concerned with respect to gender balance. We don't. But there's absolutely no reason why engineering would prefer boys over girls, and certainly the profession doesn't see it that way. Actually, most of the big employers that hire engineers and IT specialists want to hire gender balanced cohorts. With an average of 1 in 6 being a girl, that's pretty hard to do. And so they actually bias and skew the marketplace for the others. Or they hire fewer engineers because they can't find the women to balance it out. So please, by all means, tell the women, tell the girls in school, engineering and IT is for them just as it is for boys. There's absolutely no difference, and there should not be gender bias in that cohort whatsoever. Ours is a global profession. Half of our students are international students to some extent, and a third will disappear of our shores to find employment elsewhere. And the employers themselves are not necessarily Australian, they really are international, and they're looking for the right person, the right talent to fit within the team that they're going to work in. And it is a team that they're going to work in, because very rarely is an engineer or an IT specialist working in isolation. I was asked to talk a little bit about trends and what it might be looking like in 2030 or 2033 when some of your students are going to graduate from university, what engineering and IT would look like. I wish I could do that, because then I certainly wouldn't stand here. I would be a billionaire sitting somewhere enjoying something else. But I can tell you a bit about trends. First of all, digital data. I know it's probably a scary word, but in fact, it's going to be more and more common. It is still the main economic driver in the society right now. And interconnected society, digital society, are very much the trends that our engineers and IT specialists will have to work with. And they will be disruptive in many industries. Think just about driverless cars and what that would mean to taxi drivers and people that actually drive trucks and cars right now. In some places, that could be as much as 25 to 30% of the male population that actually works in that environment could actually have no job in that context. Not to think about all the mechanics and everything else that have to maintain far fewer cars. Those trends are coming up. How do you deal with that? How do you create productivity so that all these people that are displaced from these jobs actually have meaningful jobs elsewhere? Well, luckily there's something else coming up on the horizon, and that is sustainability. We all want to leave the planet to our grandchildren and our children, hopefully in a better, if not the same condition as we have received it. Green industry, making things sustainable, having less primary resources available, recycle everything, have renewable energy everything, requires new design and new manufacturing technologies. And we'll have to invent them now, and our engineers will have to invent them now in order to make this possible, that we can actually have a sustainable future. There are big trends that they will have to work with, and the big trends that we're teaching with, all things that actually you already can participate with in high schools and in schools. From year 6 onwards, they're the type of questions that I'm hoping that they will have the passion for to change. Because that's what we need being engineers and IT specialists, that they have a passion to change the world for the better. They serve society after all, just like you as teachers do, but they serve in a different way. So trends in employment, lots of things are going to change. They will have to reinvent themselves 5 to 6 times, and part of it is because we all grow older, we all will have body parts that are replaced. You know, the average 70-year-old has 5 body parts now that are being replaced. By the time they will be 70 and 75, it will be 25 to 40 body parts that probably are bionics in some way, form or another. Where do they come from? How do we manufacture them? How do we maintain them? The big new industries are going to come in that space. Very many non-traditional jobs. Engineers and IT specialists don't work in typical manufacturing jobs either. They're actually far fewer in Australia, certainly, than ever before, but service industries employ an awful lot of engineers and IT specialists. So you probably don't think of that, but when you come to the airport, the entire way that the airport is designed for flow of people, which services are there, where the customer officer is sitting, how you're being treated at the passport control, all of that is engineered, and there are engineers employed in the airport corporation just for looking after that. But so is your credit card flow being tested by engineers. Your marketing material comes from knowing who you are to your digital profile. All of that is tested on data, all tested by engineers. So what do I like you to teach so that we get the right type of material to come in? And I will start with some place where you may not immediately think of that I would like to start. But first of all, ethics and values. How to be a good citizen. It's really important. And I see more and more students coming to me not actually having a well-developed value set to work with. It has to start much earlier. It's a little bit late at university trying to fix that when they come in. But you can't work as an engineer without absolutely most impeccable ethics standards. Indeed, as a professional engineer, you sign a charter that will say basically a knight in shining armor as far as society is concerned. How do you actually do that when you don't have the right values set? So, by all means, stress that ethics and values are really important. Secondly, I want communication skills. Communication skills, anything I heard about language writing and all that, it's music to my ears. Engineers need that, and preferably not one language, but 2 languages. So if you can teach them besides English, Spanish, by all means do so. Chinese is not bad, Indonesian. They are really important because engineers and IT specialists don't design products for an English market. They design products for the world market. They design products for the individual. They have to understand the cultures in which those things are going to operate. If you don't have another language, you don't have the other cultures, at least as an understanding under your belt, you're actually much poorer design engineers. And most design engineers will not be design engineers unless they have that cultural ability. So, very important, communication skills. The other thing that is most surprising to people is engineers actually write 70% of the time reports and try to communicate that their crazy idea is the right thing to do. If they can't communicate, their idea will never see the day of light because nobody will ever finance it, nobody will ever make the approvals work. Communication, communication, before anything else almost. I like them to know mathematics and computer. Surprising. But in fact, we can help in that space. We can train as well. And we really love to work with it. My mantra is, and I challenge anybody, and I've never met anybody yet who can't do specialist maths to an H1 level. Can always be achieved, but it does require clicking on the lights and making it work for these people. They can do that, great, I like that. But even that, computers will be able to do maths and computing much better than themselves. What I really in the end want is that they question everything they hear. Nothing is sacred, everything can be questioned, everything can be done better. You can come out with that type of knowledge and that type of ambition, I would say it's fantastic. And the last word I want to say is a very important saying. I don't know who said it first. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me. Let them do things and they will learn. Knowledge is cheap, understanding is great, but innovation is gold. Thank you.
To me, how much people from different backgrounds, when they're talking about what we're doing with children, kind of like snap. It matches, and I think that was fantastic for us to think about in terms of what our young students, I think from year prep, I think from 3-year-olds can be exposed to and what we're aiming to develop in them. So thank you very much. And I do appreciate, again, I'll say this, the connections we can build right across the university. Now, I'm about to introduce Michael Muscat, who is the principal of Canberra College, and we're just getting his PowerPoint up. And Michael is the person who had the extraordinary courage, as did his whole school team. How many people actually saw Revolution School? I thought quite a few educators would have watched it. And I'm sure you have had senses as it was being run through. There would have been moments when you saw, yes, that's so powerful, and moments when your shoulders were like this and you were wondering why that was part of the program. Am I right? Certainly that was my reaction. But it was an act of great courage for Michael and his school to have 4 cameras in their school every day, all the time. And they had some control, limited control, in the end over what was finally put into the series. But Canberra College is part of UMNOS 15, and I thought it was just really interesting for you to hear from Michael the real story of Canberra. Welcome, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. And where do I begin? I gave this talk to the UMNOS 14 people last week, and I had an hour and a half, so I'm going to have to pack it into 10 minutes. I'll see how I go. I'm pretty good, actually, at getting into it. So basically, a couple of years ago, we were invited to participate in what the ABC described as a landmark series in education, and asked us if we would be interested in being a big part of it. And we tossed and turned and wondered about that for quite a while. In the end, we bit the bullet for a few good reasons, we thought. First of all, we had a good story to tell. And secondly, we would be working with the Melbourne Graduate School of Education. So we felt confident in that space. But we probably didn't realise fully how courageous we were being at the time. So, as Catherine said, yes, we had the cameras going at the school every day of the 2015 school year. It was quite an experience. It kept us on our toes. Now I can't see that, so I can see that. Twist that around. Yeah, so what was perhaps really interesting was that 2 of the assistant principals had fixed cameras in their offices, which went 24/7. And that caused some interesting moments. But it was particularly good to work with the Melbourne Graduate School of Education very closely during the course of that year as part of as one of the UMNOS schools and part of this project. So it was fantastic to have Field and John Haddy and Lee Waters, and just a wonderful crew of people visiting our school and enriching our work as we went through that year. It was an incredibly rich year for Canberra College. And incredibly, the students became very accustomed to, and the teachers, we all became accustomed. The film crew were terrific to work with. We built a trusting relationship, and 99 times out of 100, if we said that was a sensitive area, keep away, they did. Pretty good for media people. So the impact of this series, it was overwhelmingly positive. And even as I go around the place, I have noticed that my face is a little bit more recognisable out there. And people will stop me anywhere and say, hey, that was fantastic, that series. Thank you for doing that. Now, people are doing that for a whole range of reasons. And it's quite intangible. I can't put my finger on it 100%. But what I suspected is that it finally gave the Australian community a window into a pretty normal school, taking up the everyday challenges that we take on every day. And there's a surprising amount or a surprising lack of understanding of the work that we really do every day. But I think the Australian community have really embraced that opportunity to have a look in. And they like what they see. They think it's fantastic, the work that you do every day. So, the intensity and complexity of teacher work, the things that are brought into the classroom that are dealt with, the incredible care that our teachers offer our students on a daily basis, and so much more. So, the impact of the series, I think it was profound, and I'm very glad that we participated. But there is a cost, and we noticed that last week when we were the subject of a lot of media and social media attention, generated by one parent and one student. When all the planets are in alignment, then away it goes. It gets a life of its own, and all we could do was hold steady and diffuse wherever we could. I was most gratified that our own school community stood solidly with us, and people making judgments outside of our school with very flimsy understanding, actually based on a whole series of misinformation. You know, it was disturbing to see how that could catch a hold so fast. There is no substance to any of that discussion that took place, and the storm has happened and it's passed, and you think, wow, this is the world we live in. But what's interesting about Revolution School is that the very thing that made our school a Revolution School was not really the subject of the documentary. And that is all about school improvement. The process that our school went through since 2008. So back in 2008, our school was in a very sad sort of position. Our student achievement data was very low, our VCE data down around, our median study score in the bottom 10%, NAPLAN unbelievably low. All the surveys, our attitudes to school, our staff survey, our parent survey, very, very low. Student attendance data, I think our students were missing 25 days a year on average, each student. So that's half a term of being absent from school. I mean, at Victorian, there's a lot of absenteeism anyway, but ours took the cake. And staff turnover very high, suspensions and expulsions very, very high as well. So we had quite a challenge on our hands to pick up this school and make it worthy of our community. So we needed a plan, and we adopted some of you would be familiar with the work of Zabar, Kimber and Marshall, focusing on getting the preconditions right at the school. So building strong leadership with a shared strategic vision, creating an orderly learning environment, focusing on what matters most, and building teacher efficacy. That was the way we were going to bring up our school. Now, it's really difficult to... How much time have I got already? About a minute. So that's the plan that we took, and basically 80 years later, that's our model of instruction, which was really important in this process. So, as a result of implementing that plan, which I don't have much time to describe, we lifted very significantly. Our VCE median study score came up from the bottom 10% of the state and in the last 4 years it's been sitting among the top 20 to 25% of, 25 to 30% of state schools, which is an enormous jump and a sustained improvement. And that plan has growth, matched cohort growth has been above state average over the past 4 years in most areas. The attitude, perception data of students, parents and staff has grown significantly. Most indicators hovering around the 80th percentile, which is an extraordinary leap. And the one I take most interest in is the school connectedness. I never wanted to be a principal at a school where the students didn't feel connected and part of and enjoyed coming to school. Well, that rose from about 5% in 2008 and hovering around 80% at the moment, which we're really pleased about. So let's take a look at some of the other things. That's the VCE median study score 2008. That median study score of 24 was put us in a very low place, and in you can see over the past 4 years, that's risen very significantly. That's some of our attitudes to school survey. The strongest results in the learning area. All the blue indicators are very, very strong now. The parents see it. The general satisfaction especially is the one that the department looks at the closest, but on all areas, consistently pretty high. And school improvement has taken place in a very holistic sense. There's a whole range of indicators that I see as principal to indicate a really effective and thriving school environment. All these sorts of things. So in 2015, Canberra College was part of the UMNOS group. It's been a fantastic experience for us. We ended up taking on 2 projects. Firstly, the reading program, the independent reading, and that has been just a magnificent program for us. It's had huge impact and has been embraced by our staff and students. We've also taken on Lee Waters' Visible Wellbeing pilot project, and it's going to be fully implemented next year, years 7 to 10, which is also a fantastic thing because we want our students to be resilient, we want them to be self-aware, and we want them to thrive in a very changeable community. So I'm going to skip back. Now, John, really happy to see that because it's the teachers that drive change, and I fully concur with that. So there are the revolutionaries. They have done a magnificent job, and teachers need to be offered greater esteem in our community because they are fantastic. Thank you for your attention.
So I'm going to put that up, which is the Melbourne Graduate School of Education clinical model, and I'm not going to talk about it except to say that is the basis of all our work. And I think you have a copy of it in your file. And I next wanted to talk to you quickly about how that works for us in our network. So we take the Melbourne Graduate School of Education model, and then we talk about effective collaboration around that model. And so we work, I'm going to read this to you. I know it's not the right way to use this slide, but I'm going to. We work in a structured, efficient in order to be effective because teachers don't have enough time for everything that they need to be able to do. So when they're working collaboratively in your schools, they need to be able to use that collaboration time very productively. Both teams of teachers and school leaders at school and network level. And our aim is that your teachers we will know every child, know exactly where they're up to in their learning, know their ZPD, plan for each child what they should learn next, plan how to teach this, know the most impactful pedagogic interventions, strategies, teaching strategies, because we're working on teaching practice, and what resources are required, measure whether the child has learned whatever you aimed for the child to learn, that is, measure our impact, modify practice accordingly, and also really importantly, build the metacognitive capacity in each child so they can be active, responsible learners. And I think if we do that, the people that even wants to recruit will be incredibly ready to undertake engineering or any other professional or other learning. So, for me, there are 3 critical factors in all the work we do. They are at the top level, and if you want to work on feedback or if you want to work on learning intentions, all those very high yield strategies we address in the network, but at the top level there are 3 elements. And number 1, of course, is that whole concept of knowing our impact. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're achieving, how do you know what to do next? And there's been a lot of discussion of that. Now, I want to lay on with an absolute trowel. Leadership of instruction and learning. The evidence says that unless the school principal and the school leadership team are actively, practically and symbolically leading instruction, you won't get sustained improvement. You'll get pockets of improvement, you won't get it at scale and you won't get it sustained. So I just want you to leave this room thinking carefully about this. If you want to be in the University of Melbourne Network at school, you are making a commitment as a school principal to participate. So it's not good enough to think, oh, my success coordinator's going to the seminars, everything will be beautiful, I'll have a chat with them when they get back, if I'm organised enough, and we'll see what comes of it. You need to be there, and you need to be there for your school and for the benefit that you get from your work with other colleague principals and vice versa. And I think some of that came out in the discussion from the principal's account. So, and thirdly, the whole premise of our network is that collaboration makes a difference, and we're talking about that at the level of the network and in your schools, which is why, and I was really pleased that one of the panel said it's very good to start with, or be prepared to start thinking about how you're going to set up a professional learning team structure in your school. Now, many of you will already have that and have that operating well. So, how do we get there? Through our collaborative work aimed at impact. It's not just a chat, it's not just a gorgeous chance to explore some nice ideas. It's how we're going to make a difference for the children in our schools. And I always like this quote of Richard Elmore, which is the Professor Richard Elmore from Harvard: the work is the work. It's actually in doing that work in the network, we're not just having a course where we have some nice ideas, we're actually working in the network every time you come to a seminar. So that slide is important. I think probably we can skip through the next one because it's being covered, but I do want to talk about this. This is how the network works, right? Now, there are 4 networks that have 73 schools. UMNOS 14 is finishing this year. You heard what David Lord said. Some of them will be continuing to work, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But within the network, you get a lot of input from the very knowledgeable, from the evidence base that MGSE offers. For example, Professor John Hackey, who's not the only person who talks to you, and he can't come to every seminar, pity, but there you are. But from a lot of people. And then you decide on a focus, and you work in a group, which becomes like a PLT in the network. And so there's some of the focus, the areas of focus that people have chosen to work on. And it's a network, so you make the decisions. And I assumed in the first year that those focuses would change over the 3 years. As it turns out, so far, no one has said, look, we've done writing, now we want to move to something else. Another point I want to make for you is we do not ask you to come into this network and change direction. Unless you decide you're doing the wrong work, we want you to be able to work on a focus which fits with your strategic intent in your current annual plan. So that work in those first 3 or 4 seminars where you actually decide what you want to focus on and work with a smaller group is very important. And each focus group is supported by a critical friend who has a deep knowledge in that area. That's pretty much how we work. Now, I also want to talk about, I almost don't need to because it was mentioned again by the principals panel. There's just a growing cross-network learning, school visits one to another. We've even got schools now visiting from UMNOS 16 in the Golden Valley network, coming to Taylor's Lakes to look at their very, very structured, very effective, across the whole curriculum reading program, for example. Now we're also developing a register, and the register is a register of what each school who's in our network have a particular expertise in. Now, they're doing that with UMNOS 14 at this stage. And do you know what those schools are saying? They have said to us, they won't be in UMNOS next year, but if a school looks at the register and says, we really want to visit Kerry School or David School, because their expertise is in, let's say, in Kerry School in writing or David School evidence-informed practice, and we want to know more about how to do that in our school, they are open to those school visits. So they are offering beyond their membership. And of course, what we want to also do is set up an alumni group, and we're just starting to think about exactly what that would look like. So that cross-network learning is very powerful and goes beyond the formal sessions that we run. This is how we work. We run, I should say 6 to 8 seminars a year. We basically run 8 seminars a year, but 6 to 8 seminars. We ask that the principal attend and participate in at least 5 of them. Now we know our diary might not match yours. We'll have our diary out as soon as we've decided who's in the network. And also, every school has, at some point or other, an incident or something which requires the principal to be on deck. So we don't, we're not unrealistic. But the point of that is that it is very important that you're an active participant to make the network work. Success coordinators attend seminars with principals, and also we offer 6 in the first year and 4 to 6 subsequent years training days specifically for success coordinators. Basically, I'm going to be very brief on this. A success coordinator is 0.5 time release, and we do a lot of work with them, first of all, on being able to interpret data so that the teachers don't have to. What the teachers get, the teachers have to interpret it, to provide data that the teachers can interpret productively. And the effect size calculator is one way of doing that. We also train them to be coaches of their colleagues. They're able to work in a classroom with a teacher, model teaching for a group of teachers, and lead and set up PLTs. If you want to join the network, it costs $16,500 a year. We have several schools who've managed, little schools, because I hate excluding little schools, who've managed to get a bit of support from their organisation, if it's the Department of Catholic Ed, certainly. So, keep going. I do, no, go back, sorry. I just have to say, I think, John, collective efficacy is now number 1. Collective efficacy is number 1 in high yield strategies. And for me, in UMNOS, we certainly aim to build a culture. First of all, every single child can learn. And we range from special schools and from childcare right through to year 12. Every single child can learn. And my definition of collective efficacy, which comes from Roger Goddard in the United States, is that every child believes they can learn. So that's really important the way that's developed in your school. Every teacher believes that every child can learn, and every teacher in your school believes they know how to teach children. So if you've got those 3 things in place, you've got collective efficacy. Secondly, the only way you can have impact in your school is to get focused. And Michael talked, when he talked an hour and a half, about how much they pushed away the things that looked exciting and interesting but weren't going to make a difference for children. And obviously it takes effort and perseverance, and it is tough work. I don't think people understand that. That's one reason why I like Revolution School. Thanks. So in your folder you have a page that says what is UMNOS, and that it was worked out pretty much in the first year with UMNOS 14. You have a 3-year snapshot of what we aim to achieve, and you have an expression of interest information page on your table. Can you get onto that slide? It looks like that. Now, if you want to join UMNOS, you have to express interest. And you have to express interest by the 20th of September. And we don't ask you to write a thesis or provide us with 20 pages of data. We want 3 things from you. 1, evidence that you are, as a school leadership team, committed to leading, learning and instruction. And that doesn't mean you've been doing it for 8 years. You might be starting on a journey now. I just want evidence that you're committed. No more than 500 words. Part B. Some statement from you of what you hope to get out of being in a network and what you might contribute. And then you need somebody who has some knowledge of your school to say, yeah, what they're saying is accurate. The joy of working in UMNOS, of course, is that everybody comes in wanting to learn, lead instruction and learning. I think that's all I need to say, and I don't know how much time we've got left. None? Hand over.
Could you join me in thanking Catherine Zimmer? Catherine has been an exceptional leader in this nearly 3 years of network, probably 3 when we count the first expressions of interest. So, Catherine, I thank you for that, and her leadership when she was in the Western region, in terms of growth across the whole region, was exceptional. So we're building on that experience. We've reached the time limit, so I'm not going to have general questions, but Catherine's committed herself to stay here to answer any particular questions you have. I just want to acknowledge all the contributors, particularly the 4 from the networks, 3 of them sitting there, and 1 who had to leave just a few minutes ago. And I want to thank my colleague Ian Mariels. We really want the university more engaged, and I think he could see quite clearly how this connection is so important. And I think he gave you just a snapshot of where kids need to go in the future. I think it's important the kids know that, and you know that as well. I just want to say something about Michael and Revolution School, because this was something he said when CJZ came to us 2 years ago. This was high risk, and for me it goes back to something I said at the very start: how do we influence the politicians? And for me this was an opportunity to show the public at large, and what do the public do? They vote. How complex and challenging this profession is. And just one anecdote: when I was speaking to some Golden Valley principals after the first episode, one got up and said, I just want to say something about Revolution School. This was the Friday morning after that first episode. He said, I was having this rather heated discussion between parent and child being picked up after school that night, and I thought we'd better go out and investigate. So we hope you all become, in your own little way, Revolution Schools, and if we find that we've got enough for several networks, I'm not sure what we're going to do. But but Catherine will work it out for sure. Can I just thank you all for showing your support, showing your interest, and looking forward to seeing many of you next year. So thanks for coming.